Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has been addressing the United Nations General Assembly, despite being denied a visa to attend the session in New York by the US government. This is how he opened his remarks, delivered by video link from the West Bank.
I speak to you today after almost 2 years in which our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip have been facing a war of genocide, destruction, starvation, and displacement waged by the Israeli occupation forces, in which they killed and injured more than 220,000 Palestinians, the majority of whom are unarmed children, women, and the elderly. A war in which they displaced hundreds of thousands and prevented the entry of food and medical supplies and caused the starvation of 2 million Palestinians. They imposed a stifling siege on an entire people and destroyed more than 80% of homes, schools, hospitals, churches, mosques, facilities, and infrastructure. What Israel is carrying out is not merely an aggression. It is a war crime and a crime against humanity that is both documented and monitored, and it will be recorded in history books and the pages of international conscience as one of the most horrific chapters of humanitarian tragedy in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Abbas went on to describe the situation in the rest of Palestine.
In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Palestine, the extremist Israeli government continues to implement its settlement policies through illegal settlement expansion and developing projects for annexing settlements. The latest was the construction plan for E1, which would divide the West Bank into 2 parts and would isolate occupied Jerusalem from its surroundings and would undermine the option of the two-state solution in a blatant violation of international law and relevant Security Council resolutions, specifically Resolution 2334. Furthermore, the Israeli Prime Minister announced a plan for what he calls Greater Israel, which we reject and completely deplore.
Now, we've covered the E1 plan Abbas referenced to there before. Approved by Benjamin Netanyahu's government last month, the construction of the E1 settlement, shown in red, would essentially create a line of Israeli settlements, marked in blue, running west to east from Jerusalem to the Jordan River, essentially dividing the West Bank in 2. It would also increasingly disconnect East Jerusalem from the West Bank. It's hard not to describe that, as well as all of the other illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank, as a slow-motion annexation of the Palestinian territory, which is odd, because according to French President Emmanuel Macron, US President Donald Trump assured him that the US would not tolerate any attempt by Israel to annex the West Bank, apparently calling it a red line for Washington. Given the ongoing genocide in Gaza, in which over 65,000 Palestinians now have been killed by Israel's military, which also continues to flatten Gaza City, the US doesn't seem to have any red lines when it comes to Israeli conduct. But with a flurry of Western governments recently rushing to recognize Palestinian statehood, Abbas also turned to the future governance of Palestine.
Despite all what our people have suffered, we reject what Hamas carried out on the 7th of October. These actions that targeted Israeli civilians and took them hostages, because these actions do not represent the Palestinian people, nor do they represent their just struggle for freedom and independence. We have affirmed, and we will continue to affirm, that the Gaza Strip is an integral part of the state of Palestine, and that we are ready to bear full responsibility for governance and security there. Hamas will not have a role to play in governance. Hamas and other factions will have to hand over their weapons to the Palestinian National Authority as part of a process to build the institutions of a one state, one law, and one legal security forces.
It seems to me, of course, we've known Mahmoud Abbas to be pretty close with people such as those in Israel, also those in the West too, as we've seen from many of the statements that have come since a bunch of Western states have decided to recognize the state of Palestine. One of the conditions that we've seen from them is to ensure that Hamas does not have any political power in a future Palestinian state. So it does make sense to me, at the very least, that Abbas there is wanting to play to those people who he sees as being the ones with which that any recognized state of Palestine is contingent upon pleasing. So whilst it probably will irritate a lot of Palestinians, because there is still popular support, especially in the West Bank, for Hamas, less so nowadays in Gaza, that they wouldn't therefore have any control. And the Palestinian Authority being given unitary control over both territories has been median opinion amongst the kind of states, again, that have the ear, at least somewhat, of Israel and have broadly been the ones who have been reticent to recognize Palestine up to this point, want to see from a future Palestinian state. So whilst I understand that there are plenty of Palestinians who will be frustrated at that, it does seem to be that this would be the only route for, at this point, the two-state solution that would be acquiesced to by the Western governments, on which, unfortunately, pretty much all of the future of the Israel-Palestine conflict will rely on. Now, earlier today, I spoke to Aseel Baidoun, Medical Aid for Palestinian Senior Advocacy and Campaigns Manager. Normally, she lives in the West Bank, but spoke to me while in London. I began by asking her what her reaction was to Trump's claim that Israel's annexation of the West Bank is a red line for Washington.
Well, I'm surprised because I haven't been seeing any red lines by the US on Israel's actions towards Palestinian. And just to let you know that Israel has been already annexing the West Bank for so long. And what they are proposing now is further restrictions and grabbing more land. It's not like we were living autonomously on the West Bank before. So I just wonder, what does the US mean by a red line, given what's going on already on the West Bank?
But people sometimes say if Israel wanted to commit a genocide in Gaza, they would have done it already. Similarly, I guess they'd say if Israel wanted to annex the West Bank, they would have done it already. But what does annexation really look like on the ground?
So that's why I told you, like, it has been going already. So since October 2 years ago, we have hundreds of new gates installed between cities and towns, Palestinian towns. So we already are looking at full fragmentation of the West Bank. For example, I'm living in Ramallah. If I want to go to Nablus, it can take me a day instead of an hour, and I may not be able to reach Nablus. So Israel has already been installing iron gates on the entrances of each town and each city. They have been annexing hundreds of dunams by expanding settlements, and settler violence has increased to a point that we have thousands of people just displaced by settler violence. So it makes me wonder, what does it mean we're talking about annexation? What else can it mean? We're so scared that we'll be held in concentration camps. So if this is not annexation, then they're talking about a different level where Palestinians will be actually concentrated in small areas, and all these iron gates that they have installed will be closed. And that means we cannot move at all. Now we can move with many restrictions, but we can still move. So we're talking about more annexation of land, less space for Palestinians, and more controlled movement of Palestinians.
So when you're saying that there would be restrictions on things like movement, are you saying that the bits that are currently Area C and Area B would therefore be what Israel would be essentially recognizing as their territory, creating the current bits of Area A is where they're going to concentrate Palestinians at the moment, and therefore meaning that any amount of travel that Palestinians would usually be able to do via places like Area B would therefore be completely off limits in future. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm suggesting they mean by annexation, because already Israel has control over Area C and Area B, but we still managed to move from Area A to Area B. However, Area C has become really hard to move. We cannot build structures, and access to healthcare has been really been a struggle for Palestinians from Area B or Area C. So I think exactly what you're saying, that we'll be concentrated in Area A, closed. We'll be like surrounded by closed iron gates, and we cannot move outside. And that means the population will face two options: either to be forcibly displaced out of Palestine so we can fit, or be living, again, I will use the word concentration camps, because what else will that mean if we are forced with closed gates in that area?
Palestine has recently been recognized as a state by a number of countries in the West, and yet we've seen that the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas has been refused a visa by the US to speak at the United Nations. What does that say about Palestinian state recognition?
So I'm gonna be really candid about this. So again, it's a positive moral win that they are recognizing us as a state. But let's face the realities on the ground. We are facing a genocide in Gaza that's still ongoing, and there should be a tangible recognition of the genocide in order for it to stop, and Israel should be held accountable. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything for Palestinians on the ground. We're still being killed in masses. We're still being forcibly displaced, and we're still facing starvation in Gaza. In the West Bank, as we have just been discussing, we're still facing annexation. We're still living under an apartheid system. So again, this is all a symbolic move towards the right direction of recognizing that there's Palestine. But what does it mean on the ground? We're still living in apartheid, genocide, systematic fragmentation and discrimination, and we're being killed and forcibly displaced.
Regards to your own personal remit, can you tell us a bit more about what the current situation in the enclave is like when it comes to the medical care?
Actually, there is no word in the English literature would explain the situation now in the healthcare system in Gaza. We're talking about less than 38% partially functioning hospitals. Israel has attacked every hospital in the past 2 years, killing more than 1,700 health workers, destroying hospitals, actually leaving mass graves in hospitals. Like right now, as we're talking, we have our colleagues reporting that 3 hospitals in Gaza, Shifa and Patient Friends Hospital and the Sahab Hospital, are under the threat of being raided again. We also have reports from our colleagues in another hospital in the north of Gaza, where we have 14 newborns that we don't know what will happen to them, because most probably they will be forced to be evacuated from the hospital. So the situation in Gaza is catastrophic. You know, the IPC have declared the famine. So we have a famine situation under genocide, and Israel is systematically targeting every healthcare center, every hospital. Our own colleagues in the north have been forcibly had forcibly made a decision to evacuate to the south because they were scared that they would lose their lives. And that means many medical points have been shut down. Many of our partners had also had to evacuate. So we are leaving a population around 1 million Palestinian in the north with no health care, living in a famine condition and facing relentless Israeli bombardment. And again, we're talking about a lot of diseases, not only people who are injured, they don't have medical care, but we have people with normal disease that they don't have access to healthcare. We have the whole population living in acute malnutrition, have no proper healthcare. So I really don't know what can I use in the English word to describe the situation.
And obviously within that regard, you've talked about Israel's targeting of social infrastructure like hospitals. We've seen the targeting of civilian infrastructure in places like Gaza City. They've been increasing the raising of civilian infrastructure in Gaza City in these last recent few weeks. And we've seen obviously comments by people like Bezalel Smotrich over the ability for them to use the area in Gaza for property, to be able to make some kind of moves there. And we've also seen intentions from people like Trump, such as with regards to the Trump plan that Netanyahu has said that he supports, and people like Israel Katz have done as well. But in your own personal opinion, what do you think that Israel's true intentions are for the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think it's revealing our worst fears. So I think Israel's intention is to completely, fully occupy the north and displace Palestinians towards the south. And again, I'm using the word concentration camps, where all Palestinians will be concentrated in a very small 1 or 2 areas that they will be calling humanitarian islands, but they're not humanitarian islands. They're just people crammed in one or 2 places where the humanitarian aid will be weaponized, privatized, and then Israel will have full control of the northern area and many other areas in the south. So what we're talking about is ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from the north to the south, where they will be living in inhumane conditions. They will be getting aid through Israel private and military companies. And then the Palestinians will be facing 2 choices, either to live without dignity or to find another place outside Gaza to settle and start their lives.
So you'd expect then, obviously, with regards to the West Bank, that there is the concentration and the lack of ability to move outside. But you're saying that with Gaza, the true intention is that once you have concentrated them in that very small area in the south, in places like Rafah or Al-Mawasi, for example, and they've inflicted such poor living conditions on them, such as we're seeing at the moment, the intention would be for them to then move south, for example, into somewhere like the Sinai, so that Israel can then gain full control of the whole strip. Is that something that you're suggesting there?
What I'm suggesting is that we have two areas, West Bank and Gaza. And in Gaza, they have fully almost completed their plans of ethnic cleansing. So let's say we have a grade 5. In Gaza, they have completed 4 grades out of 5 from the ethnic cleansing, because we already have mass displacement from the north to the south. And we already have people crammed in, as you said, the Mawasi and the Rafah, because they have been actually working on the plan for 2 years now. In the West Bank, they have just started the plan of ethnic cleansing, even though we are talking about unlawful occupation for more than 70 years. But in the West Bank, they're still making slower progress when it comes to concentration camps, because the area is bigger. But the intention of the Israeli government is the same. They want to ethnically cleanse Palestinians, depopulate them from the land, and they just want to have more control on Palestinian land. They want to have more Israeli settlements and increase the annexation. And they both have the same intentions, but in Gaza, we're seeing it clearly because of, again, of the genocide and of the small geographical area, which makes it easier to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from the places they lived in.